Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. The Raven Rock Mountain Complex is a highly secure military installation located in Pennsylvania in the United States, and it is often referred to as the quote underground Pentagon. This facility, also known as Site R, was built during the Cold War as a backup command center for the Pentagon and was designed to ensure continuity of government operations in case of a nuclear attack. The complex is located inside of a mountain and has a vast network of underground tunnels, facilities, and backup power systems to keep the facility running in case of a disaster. And it is even equipped with communication systems, medical facilities, and living quarters to support personnel in the event of an emergency. Basically, it has everything someone would need in the case of the absolute worst case scenario. Although the site was built for the tense times of the Cold War, it is still in use today, but the functions and capabilities of the site remain classified. We know it serves as a critical facility for the US government and military, and that it has been activated as recently as during the 2020 crisis. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Located in the Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station near Colorado Springs, Colorado, this complex is a military installation and bunker. It was originally built during the Cold War as a command center for the United States North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, and as a nuclear bomb shelter for its personnel. The complex consists of multiple tunnels and chambers, including the famous blast doors that weigh 25 tons each and can withstand a nuclear blast. It has its own power plant, water supply, air filtration system, and food storage, which is of course all by design to allow for it to sustain its occupants for an extended period in the case of emergency. It has a strategic location and a huge, impressive design, which is why it is regarded as a symbol of the country's preparedness for national security threats. I mean, the thing is even built with a bunch of springs so that none of the buildings will shift more than an inch during all potential types of disaster. That is wild. Like I mentioned, it was built in the Cold War era, but that doesn't mean it's totally out of use now. The purpose of the complex has evolved over the years, and today it still serves as a vital command center for NORAD and other military agencies, and the complex remains an essential part of the United States military infrastructure. In our number 8 spot today, we have Metro 2. During the time where Stalin was in power, it is said that he instructed that an underground secret transport system would be built known as Metro 2. This mysterious underground system is said to connect different administrative institutions, and it's even rumored that it contains apartments and different technical rooms. It's sort of like a secret escape tunnel for high-level officials. Of course, it's completely blocked off to outsiders or to the general public, and while the Moscow Metro administration denies that these tunnels even exist, there was an urban exploration group back in 1994 that claimed to have found the entrance. At this point in time, the existence of only one of the rumored 4 lines has been confirmed, and it is called D6. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Yamantau Mountain Complex. The Yamantau Mountain Complex is a highly secretive and heavily guarded underground facility located in the Ural Mountains of Russia. Its purpose and functions are shrouded in mystery, and the Russian government has actually never officially acknowledged its existence. It is believed to have been built during the Cold War as a nuclear weapons storage facility and command center. There is an above-ground town called Mezgor, and that town is super secret and off limits, so much so that people aren't even allowed within the vicinity of it, and this is all thought to be because this town might be holding the complex underneath it. The underground complex is said to cover an area over 400 square miles with many tunnels and underground facilities, and its exact purpose and current use remains unknown, with various theories and speculations ranging from a bunker for the Russian government and military leaders to a storage facility for advanced weapons and technology. Some have even speculated that it could be used as a launch site for missiles or a secret laboratory for biological weapons research. Despite many attempts by outsiders to uncover the truth about this complex, the Russian government has remained quite tight-lipped, and they maintain strict security measures around the area. In our number 6 spot today, we have Project Iceworm. This is a little different than most of the others on this list, and that is because this is the name of what was once a top secret, super classified mission. This secret mission took place in the 1960s, and and it was basically intended to build a series of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet, because this would then house medium-range missiles close enough that they would be able to strike targets within the Soviet Union. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century. Basically, Camp Century was to test out Project Iceworm and see how likely it would be and how feasible it would be. So, engineers went to work and created a network of underground tunnels and buildings that included a place to stay, a kitchen, a hall for hanging out, there were supply rooms, and even a communication center and a nuclear power plant. This was all kept as a super secret for a long time and was even kept from the Danish government for 7 years. In 1966, however, the project was cancelled because of the shifting ice. This created unstable conditions for the underground tunnels that are most likely crushed now, but still remain beneath the Arctic. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Svalbard Seed Vault. Deep within a mountain that sits in between Norway and the North Pole sits this vault that is more than 320 feet inside. This vault holds a massive collection of seeds. Like, we're talking about 890,000 different preserved seed samples from nearly every country in the world. The vault that holds these seeds is made to withstand both man-made and natural disasters, and the seeds inside are meant to be kept safe, so in case of some sort of huge disaster, the seeds inside would ensure the continuation of a wide variety of very diverse food options. The door to this vault is only opened a few times a year, and just a few people are allowed inside in order to deliver seeds to the shelves. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. Wow, just like an easy name to remember. The Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center is a top secret facility located in Virginia in the United States, and it was built during the Cold War to house and protect high-level government officials in the event of a national emergency, such as a nuclear attack. The facility is owned and operated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and is designed to be self-sufficient for up to several months. It is said that this bunker was even put into action after the assassination of President Kennedy. While the facility is primarily intended for use by government officials, it has also been used to provide emergency shelter for other individuals during natural disasters such as hurricanes or earthquakes. Despite being a highly secure location, the facility's existence and purpose have been the subject of public scrutiny and controversy over the years. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Beijing Underground City. The Beijing Underground City, also known as the Beijing Underground Palace, is a vast network of tunnels and underground spaces located beneath the bustling streets of Beijing in China. Originally constructed in the 1960s as a bomb shelter and military command center during, you guessed it, the Cold War, the Underground City has now been transformed into a subterranean network of shopping malls, restaurants, cinemas, and even a skating rink. Covering an area of more than 85,000 square meters, the Underground City is divided into 3 main levels and is connected to the city's subway stations and shopping centers. The tunnels and spaces are lit by fluorescent lights and are climate controlled to provide a very comfortable environment for visitors. Some of the underground attractions include the Beijing Planning Exhibition Hall and the Underground City Commercial Center. Despite its fascinating history and modern amenities, the Beijing Underground City is still largely unknown to many tourists and visitors to the city, making it a hidden gem waiting to be explored. I guess this is one place that is definitely not so secret or mysterious anymore, and it definitely has changed quite vastly since its initial creation. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Greenbrier Bunker. The Greenbrier Bunker, also known as the Greenbrier Hotel Presidential Emergency Facility, is a former top secret underground bunker located beneath the Greenbrier Resort in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The bunker was built during the Cold War as a secure location for members of the US Congress to gather in the event of a nuclear attack. The bunker was constructed between 1959 and 1962, and it was kept secret from the public until it was exposed by the Washington Post in 1992. The facility included living quarters, meeting rooms, a power plant, a water treatment facility, and even a broadcast studio to communicate with the outside world. The bunker was maintained until the end of the Cold War in 1992 and was never used for its intended purpose. Today, the bunker is open to the public as a tourist attraction and is managed by the Greenbrier Resort. Visitors can take guided tours of the facility and learn about its history and purpose. What a nice day out with the fam. Here's where we almost had to hide the president. Maybe save the dark history for high school, you know? In our number 1 spot today, we have the Canadian Forces Base North Bay Complex. This complex is a military base located in North Bay, Ontario, which is just north of Toronto. The complex is home to the Canadian Air Defence Sector, which is responsible for the aerospace surveillance and control of Canadian airspace, and it all sits 60 floors underground. CFB North Bay is a critical element of NORAD and the binational Canada-United States Joint Defense Plan. The base monitors and defends Canadian and North American airspace through the use of radar, satellite technology, and other very advanced equipment. Because of its precarious situation in between what was the Soviet Union and the United States, this underground facility was built with safety in mind first. It was designed to withstand an attack 267 times more powerful than the one against Hiroshima. Much information on this site remains quite secret and hidden from the public, but it is said that it remains operational to this day, employing over 1,500 military and civilian personnel.
Number 10. Project Stargate. If you've watched Stranger Things, then this one probably sounds familiar to you. In the show, 11 started off as an experiment to psychically spy on the Russians, and turns out this was actually real. In the 1970s in California and later in Maryland, the CIA recruited numerous men and women who claimed they had ESP, or extrasensory perception. People with ESP typically say that they can read minds or move objects without touching them. They were recruited to try and help uncover military and domestic intelligence secrets. Mostly they just wanted them to spy on the Russians by reading their minds. The government covered it up, of course, because why would they want people knowing they're trying to use magic powers to win a war? But in 2017, when 12 million pages of records were declassified, all of the information about the so-called Project Stargate became public knowledge. People learning that they had been using the men and women to locate hostages and even track fugitives throughout the states. Number 9. Vault 7. Vault 7 was definitely never meant to make it to the public eye, but unfortunately for the CIA, it got leaked. So what actually is Vault 7? Back in 2017, WikiLeaks started releasing a series of CIA documents. Vault 7 was a group of documents that contained hacking systems that were either developed or otherwise obtained by the CIA. For the most part, it should make you wary of your technology and how the government is using it. Many people know that apps will track our searches and data to learn about us and maybe even sell it to malicious companies, but it's much more than that. Weeping Angel has the ability to turn a Samsung television into a recording device, even if it appears that your television is switched off. Vault 7 also contained the ability to intercept all your iPhone messages before they got encrypted through apps like WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram. And according to the documents, the CIA can allegedly take over your phone by exploiting vulnerabilities, but Apple has said that they patch these vulnerabilities as soon as they're aware of them. Number 8. Battalion 316. Intelligence Battalion 316 went through a few different names throughout its existence, but it was pretty much always functioning for the same reason. They were an army unit in Honduras that was responsible for carrying out political assassinations, and even kidnapping and causing pain to people who were seen as potential political competition throughout the 1980s. The group received both support and training from the CIA, even receiving their training at United States military bases. They were a military kill squad that definitely wasn't known for being friendly, committing various crimes like terrorism, misogyny, ethnic cleansing, and even so-called crimes against humanity. Their goal to remain in power in Honduras failed, leaving behind a long list of innocent victims. In 1996, members of the US Congress asked President Bill Clinton to release the documentation about the country's involvement with the human rights violations that took place in Honduras, and this is when we learned about the battalion. Number 7. MK Ultra. Let's once again return to the Red Scare and the United States fight against Russians and communism. During the Cold War, they came under the belief that the communists had invented a drug that would allow them to control human minds, and the US wanted a piece of that, starting their own research into the technique under the name Project MK Ultra, trying to find their own mind control substance that could be turned into a weapon. It ran from the 50s to the 60s and led to many unknowing or even unwilling subjects being given illicit illicit substances. The experiments were apparently covertly funded in American universities and research facilities, but it turns out that the experiments also took place in prisons and detention centers in the US, Japan, Germany, and the Philippines. The goal was to destroy the current mind and replace it with something new. Attempts included using electric shocks and illicit substances. For some, the experiments were fatal, and many others had their lives completely changed. Number 6. Operation Cyclone. Operation Cyclone became known as one of the longest and most expensive covert operations taken on by the CIA, costing around $630 million per year for a whole decade. So what was Operation Cyclone, and why was the government pouring so much cash into it? It was an operation that worked to arm and finance militant Islamic groups during the military intervention by the USSR. The goal was to aid anti-Soviet resistances outside of the United States. They gave loans, aircrafts, weapons, and other military assistance to the groups in Afghanistan, costing the United States government billions of dollars for these so-called care packages. Eventually, the Soviets were pushed out of Afghanistan, but conspiracy was still spinning. Many of the weapons ended up being sold in local markets instead of going to the rebels, and some people believe that Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda received assistance from the US military. Number 5. Operation Ajax. In the 1950s, a coup took place in Iran, and the CIA documents about it weren't released until they were pressured to a total 64 years later. As it turns out, the agency played a large role in the coup that led to the end of the current Iranian prime minister, a rise in nationalism, and sour US-Iranian relationships remaining into the 21st century. The motivation was oil. The US and UK wanted Iran's oil, but their new prime minister made it inaccessible to them, so the two countries conspired to overthrow him and get their oil back. The coup seemed to fail, and the CIA sent a message to their base in Iran calling it off, but the CIA officer who received it said, "Nah, we're not done here." So the next day, with crowds allegedly hired by the CIA, the coup, or Operation Ajax, went through and the prime minister was overthrown. The monarchy and oil fields restored in the country. Anti-Western sentiment also being restored and growing to new and extreme levels. Number 4. The Five Eyes. Are you familiar with one of the farthest reaching intelligence and espionage agencies in the world? You are probably a part of it and don't even know it. It is the once secret Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. After World War II, the US and UK came together to create an information sharing alliance as a result of how important communication was for them during the war effort. And in 1956, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand were added to this group. The classification status on these documents was USA, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, eyes only. And that was obviously a bit wordy, so they shortened it down to Five Eyes. It has been operating for 70 years now and is used for surveillance and sharing classified information between the 5 countries. The alliance was especially important during the Cold War, when the countries shared a lot of information like the location of Soviet weapons in North America. The alliance was kept a secret until documents of the original UK and USA agreement were released back in 2010. Number 3. Operation PB Success. Similarly to Operation Ajax, Operation PB Success was a covert CIA military operation that took place in another country, this time Guatemala. This was another coup that took place only a year after the one in Iran in 1954. At the time, Guatemala had a very new democracy, only being on their second democratically elected president, but the United States saw him as a threat, this being due to his allowance of the Guatemalan Communist Party to act freely and land reform movements that threatened US industries. The CIA then worked through various different plans of action to overthrow the Guatemalan government, including assassination and faking tensions between the country and Honduras. They spread false information, placed anonymous phone calls, and hired anti-communist students to create a fake opposition. Eventually, the president stepped down and their democracy was seen as unfavorable. The The United States training that the Guatemalan military now had led to a war lasting decades, tearing apart the country. But PB's success was a success as it worked, and they were able to deny CIA involvement until the documents were released in 1997. Number 2. The Secret War. We're once again fighting communism, this time in Vietnam, but while the Vietnam War was taking place, a smaller secret war was taking place in Laos, attempting to stop communism from spreading to Southeast Asia. The Americans essentially used the countries of Laos and Cambodia to fight their own war against northern Vietnam and communism, using their tribes as their soldiers. While it was clear that the small armies had no hopes of truly winning against northern Vietnam, the United States and the CIA continued on with their fight, devastating the country and peoples of Laos and Cambodia. They came out of the war with their land and lives completely lost and changed, but the CIA wrote it down in their history books as a success, disregarding the country's sacrifice. The CIA's historical retrospective on the situation not being released until many years later. Number 1. Operation Condor. It's the Cold War again, and the United States government are fighting against terrorism, this time under the code name Operation Condor. It was a campaign of political repression and so-called state terror that was backed by the US and CIA. It involved many heinous activities like kidnapping, killings, political espionage, and much more, all taking place throughout South America. The CIA chose to describe it as a cooperative effort by the intelligence/security services of several South American countries to combat terrorism and subversion, but really it was a lot more than that. Condor's key members were Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, and later Brazil. The United States provided them with planning, coordination, technical support, and military training, all routed through the CIA. It led to many military dictatorships and numerous deaths throughout South America. And there is so much detail and information on this one that if you want it, you're just gonna have to look it up for yourself.
Kicking off the list at number 10, nuclear site list. Here on Most Amazing, we love lists. I'm not sure if you can tell, but apparently the US government also fancies a list or two. Back when Obama was still running the show, a report was delivered to Congress. Well, it was supposed to be. The 266-page report featured every nook and cranny about the US nuclear program, and it was released publicly on the government printing office's website in draft form by accident. Yeah, just a casual PDF that shows us literal maps to stockpiled fuel used for nuclear warheads back in the day. We love those. The only PDFs I actually enjoy are those ones, actually. Does this stuff happen often? How does this happen? I thought this type of stuff could never happen, right? Well, MIT professor John M. Deutsch said these screw-ups do happen, and it doesn't look like a serious breach. I mean, it certainly sounds serious, but okay, we'll trust the government. Thank you, sir. Let's do it. Number 9, ClimateGate. Yeah, we had a smooth one off the bat, now we're getting right into the serious stuff. Climate stuff. Climate change and stuff. A little different sounding than Watergate, but we'll get to that one later on, obviously. ClimateGate, this was back in 2009 when some hackers released thousands of emails and files, all from the Climate Research Unit in the UK. These documents, okay, hold on to your butts for this one, they show scientists suppressing the publication of research going against global warming. So this sparked a bunch of bad ideas because at that point in 2009, we just believed it. We just stopped listening at all. Climate change critics were like, aha, I knew it. It was all a conspiracy this whole time. The CRU responded and said the emails were out of context and that the planet is indeed heating up, and we're still in fact burning towards our demise, but these docs leaked literally weeks before the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Denmark, so peculiar timing, I'd say. Science fired back pretty quick. Scientists all around the world were actively proving at that point that humans actively are causing global warming. Today we're scrambling a bit more to figure this one out than 2009. Yeah, a few more of you believe this time around. Number 8, God Save the Queen. This one's quite grim, but I have to talk about it. Have you ever wondered what will happen after the Queen passes away? I mean, I know it's the last thing we want to think about right now because dark, obviously, but it's hard not to think of, especially when Politico magazine releases Operation London Bridge to the public. Yeah, what is that? This magazine somehow got documents showing each and every step in detail what'll happen when that fateful day arrives. There'll be phone calls to the Prime Minister, of course, would be first. Customs require that the Prime Minister is informed by the monarch's private security. Flags will fly at half-mast, of course, but oddly enough in this document the Queen's death is referred to as D-Day. Yeah, 9 days of protocols will follow after afterwards, and after a service at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, that's when Queen Elizabeth will be buried with King George VI. It's dark, but I mean, imagine reading about this one morning in 2021. What an odd article. What a brutal way to wake up. Number 7, secret PowerPoint. Nothing sounds less cool than a leaked 41 slide PowerPoint presentation, but I'll do my best. Here we go. When it comes to the NSA, odds are this PowerPoint is going to be pretty juicy, right? This slideshow was often used to train US intelligence, and I gotta say, 41 pages? That's it. I did 45 on medieval knights in high school. That's all I'm saying. Step your game up. This program was called PRISM. You probably heard about this. This is a big deal. And it cost about $20 million a year. This was the highlight of the Snowden leak. PRISM kicked off back in 2007. See, originally they partnered with Microsoft, but once they were attached to Apple come 2012, that's when things got a little dicey, as most things are with Apple. The PowerPoint confirmed that the NSA has access to servers belonging to massive tech giants. Google, Skype, YouTube even, so I don't know, search history, you may want to delete that stuff. There was a summit in California which originally was tense. The United States was accusing China of cyber attack, but right after Edward Snowden leaked the PRISM tea, they didn't have much power at said summit. So China and Europe citizens were obviously not too pleased here. Yeah, leaked data, we don't like hearing about that. This one gets a little worse. Number 6, Big Brother is watching. Even allies of the United States are not safe here, okay? Thanks to Snowden, our boy again, gotta mention him a couple times in this list. At the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. It's a lot of people, it's a lot of eyes, a lot of spies. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones, not just a couple of dudes. They were spying on 35 world leaders, one of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after finding out and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Oh, brutal. She said the F word too. It's like, hey, we were friends, pal. Don't go through my phone. Don't swipe left in the photos, okay? Betrayal. Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring regular phone calls in Spain for the average folks. So if you thought you were off the hook, you're not, literally and figuratively. They monitored about 60 million calls in 1 month. So yeah, world leader or not, be a little concerned about these guys. Maybe. You know, save some tea for in person. You don't want to give up all that good stuff on the phone. Number 5, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, personal information from 191 million voters was leaked to the public online. Yeah, this feels like yesterday. I remember this all unfolding. I was like, what? How? Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. See, Forbes had described Vickery as, dare I say, a good hacker. They're what's referred to as these white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploding them, you know? Unlike Snowden or other people. That's the key, that's the Donnie difference. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims here, so it was a big one. All their names, addresses, birth dates, phone numbers, emails, you name it, things you don't want other people knowing, let alone third parties, were all out there. If you could vote, you were exposed. We're still unsure who is behind this entire leak. CSO Online and databreaches.net suggest that the information more than likely came from software provider Nation Builder, but CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and they did not create the database. Although he conceded that it is possible that some of the information that it contains may have come from the data we make available for free to campaigns. He's like, no, we didn't do it, but maybe we did. It's like, okay. So a third party took what they could and really ran with it. That's terrifying. Time to change your email. Again. Number 4, psychoelectronic weapons. Yeah, this sounds like something Iron Man uses. It doesn't sound too chill now, does it? Psychoelectronic weapons. The first time Curtis Waltman heard of these was by accident, as you could have guessed. He was receiving documents via Yahoo and they were not what he expected. See, originally he had filed a Freedom of Information Act request to Washington State Fusion Center. See, he was trying to find out more on the clashes between Antifa and the far right, but he got a response and it was all about experimental weapons. Guy gets a zip file back in return called EM Effects on Human Body. He's like, Big Shiny Tune 6? He's like, what? I didn't ask for this. Way too many viruses in that one. Big Shiny Tune 7, I think, was the good one. That's the good one. In this document, he saw diagrams on these weapons and the effects that they have on people. There's muscle quaking, all body pain. One of the effects allowed users to control their dreams. Is this a weapon? This is pretty remarkable. This was clearly sent by mistake. The only emails I get are student loans, and those ones are not by mistake. Those ones are definitely on purpose. They're like, Mr. Taylor. I'm like, oh God, they found me. Number 3, quantum computer. This next one's pretty eye-opening. Here we go. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Deepfakes are also getting way too good. I've fallen for way too many fake trailers. I thought they were doing a Back to the Future reboot with Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. for like 4 days. All fake. Whole thing's fake. But thanks to our man Snowden, the OG secret revealer, it was reported in the Washington Post on January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is working hard at creating their own computer. Yeah, how fun must that one be? I wonder if it can run Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 without getting hot. No computer can do that. It's called the quantum computer, and it costs about $80 million to create this program. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, not intimidating at all. It's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. So it can break encryptions for just about anything. Finance records, medical, your old MSN, hopefully, maybe, probably, definitely not. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption, which for the average computer today, that takes years. This supercomputer they're working on can break through a lot faster. We can get through in days, even hours. So you better clear that search history now while you still can. Thanks for the hot tips, Snowden. I was gonna switch to PC gaming, but you know what? I'll wait it out. I'll wait till this new one comes out. It looks a little faster. Number 2, WikiLeaks war logs. Companies have to be somewhere, right? We're in a film studio in Toronto. We go to a certain place. We leave said certain place in a said certain area. Right? Where do places like WikiLeaks live? How do they stay secure? Well, in Stockholm, apparently, buried under 100 feet below street level in an old nuclear bunker. That's where. Right next to Pirate Bay. They're neighbors, actually. They knock on the cement walls. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. Now, this is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks, but Julian Assange, frontrunner of this whole operation, his hard drive is in this bunker behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators, so he's secure. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from 2004 to 2009. Now, it's one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraq war logs out of the 109,000 confirmed in total. That's horrible. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics afterwards. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009. One of the biggest leaks in US history, no doubt about it. And finally, number 1, Watergate. Yeah, it's not an internet leak, but it's too good to talk about. This is OG, come on. We have to finish on Watergate. In the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were all arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. Now, it was pretty obvious they intended on bugging the place. They looked like spy kids. They had all the gears. They were, it was fishy. As the year went on, the election came closer and closer, and then all of a sudden, out of the woodwork comes this anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post reporters that apparently the Watergate bugging incident was a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage kicked off by none other than President Nixon himself. Yeah, he was trying to get that re-election. Now, despite this information leak and it being reported in the news and all that good stuff, Nixon was still re-elected, even though he was involved in this entire scandal. These men were clearly linked to a fundraising group for Nixon, but his administration just kept denying any involvement. It wasn't until a year later in 1972 when reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, they also came forward and exposed more stuff. Yeah, they exposed the administration's role in this entire scandal, and they had an inside source, an FBI agent named Mark Feltz, and this ultimately led to Nixon resigning later in 1974, the first president to do so.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have SIM cards. We see all the time in movies and shows when people are trying to be super secret, they smash their phone and their SIM card, but as it turns out, maybe we should all be smashing our SIM cards, super secret lifestyle or not. In February of 2015, it was reported that Snowden provided documents that showed that the NSA and GCHQ had hacked into a Dutch company that is responsible for manufacturing and supplying 2 billion SIM cards per year, and they supply places like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and a variety of other providers. While this hack would suggest that the agencies would then now have access to billions of unique encryption keys, which could potentially allow them to bypass wireless providers and monitor both voice and data transmissions of every user that has a SIM card made by this company. The company did reply to the situation and said that they had been the target of at least 2, quote, particularly sophisticated intrusions, and they suggested that they believed that the NSA and the GCHQ were responsible, but the company then denied that the hack was successful in gaining access to those encryption keys.
Number 9, quantum computer. This next one is eye-opening, to say the least. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Deepfakes are going to ruin my life. They're getting really good at those. I feel like an old man every time I see those and fall for it. But thanks to our man Snowden, it was reported in the Washington Post on January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is working hard at creating their own computer. How fun must that that be? It's called the quantum computer, and it cost about $80 million to create. And no, it can't send you back in time. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, which is not intimidating at all, and it's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. I want to make so many jokes, but I won't. So it can break encryptions for just about anything. Finance records, medical, your old MSN, probably. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption, which for the average computer today, that takes, I don't know, years, but this supercomputer can break through a lot faster. I'm talking days. Just don't go in my MSN, please.
In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Dishfire. It was reported by The Guardian that it had been revealed that the NSA collects 200 million text messages a day from around the world. They then use these messages to pull the details of certain location information, contact networks, and the credit card details of different mobile users. It was also reported that the NSA also provided British intelligence agencies with all of the data, just without the actual context of the text messages. So the NSA has all your secrets and nudies, but at least they didn't share them? I don't know. Basically, they have all of this data and at any point could potentially extract certain information like past travel plans, your financial transactions, your contacts, regardless of whether or not you were being investigated for something. Yes, this sounds illegal, unethical, and a little shady, and this revelation all came before former President Barack Obama gave a speech about proposed policy changes in reaction to the whistleblowing that was going on around Snowden and the NSA.
Number 7. Friends without benefits. Even allies of the United States are not safe here. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones, which, by the way, not just a couple of random dudes, they were spying on 35 world leaders. One of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after finding out, of course, and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Really went personal with the friends comment there. It's like when you show somebody a photo on your phone and they start swiping, like, hi, hello, betrayal, see ya. Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, I'm not a world leader, what's the big deal here? Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. They monitored about 60 million calls in 1 month, so yeah, world leader or not, be a little concerned about these guys. Maybe.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the Brazil spying scandal. It was reported by The Guardian that Brazil was second only to the United States in terms of the amount of communications that were being subjected to surveillance by the NSA. This means that the NSA were seriously spying on millions of Brazilians, including the emails and phone calls of their president. At the G20 summit that year, which took place in Russia, Brazil's president at the time, Dilma Rousseff, had a one-on-one meeting with Obama in reference to this. He said that he would look into it and get back to her, but before he could, more NSA tea was spilled, and it was revealed that the agency had also targeted Petrobras, which is Brazil's state oil company. This led the president to call this new information industrial espionage, and as a result, she called off her scheduled visit to the White House and demanded answers. The called off visit was important because it was to be the first state visit by a Brazilian president in about 2 decades, and although the Obama administration claimed that it was a joint decision made by both presidents, some media outlets described it as the sternest punishment that had been received at that time in response to all of these NSA leaks. This also led Brazil to take a multitude of steps to hopefully get away from the American-run internet.
Number 5. Backup. When Glenn Greenwald kicked this whole thing off in 2013 with Snowden and his reveals, it was this massive security breach, obviously. Snowden was of course in hot water immediately, but he was ahead of the game from the start. See, Snowden had told Greenwald that if anything crazy happens to him, well, he'll just leak even more information. If Snowden was unable to access these encrypted documents on one of his 4 laptops, then it was set up to automatically send those private documents to higher ups, aka the people directly involved in the leak. On top of that, Snowden reminded The Guardian that he has many more secrets to spill, specifically the NSA's surveillance systems. This is why you make backups. Duly noted, Snowden.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the embassy catastrophe. There was a document from 2007 that was leaked which named 38 different embassies and missions that were so-called targets of US surveillance. This document didn't quite make it clear whether or not these targets were being looked into by only the NSA or if the CIA and FBI were also involved. The document described certain things like bugging fax machines with devices that allowed them to listen in on conversation, and the document also listed the names of different programs that are used within the embassies. The document showed that the embassies targeted weren't just those of countries who seemed to be enemies with the United States, and instead included places like India and Mexico, Greece, and Turkey. It appears as if the goal was to gain insider information into the diplomatic relations between the targets and the United States. The EU embassy in Washington, D.C. was one of the targets on this document, and this leak had the potential to have jeopardized one of the largest attempted free trade agreements in the world, because shortly after this all came out, negotiations were set to begin between the EU and the United States. The French president at the time made his anger about the situation very public and stated that all future negotiations will only be made under the agreement that the United States cease all unauthorized surveillance of any EU buildings or personnel.
Number 3. China. I mentioned earlier that summit where the United States originally wanted to call out China for cyber attacks, but instead Snowden leaked a PowerPoint training slideshow and the tables were turned just like that. Snowden revealed himself as this massive spy kid on June 12th, and he said he was planning on remaining in Hong Kong until he was kicked out. But in his first press interview since coming out with all this information, he informed South China's Morning Post that the NSA was hacking Chinese and Hong Kong computers since back in 2009. That's a long time ago. It's like when Avatar 1 came out. That's how long ago that was. More specifically, Snowden said that the NSA hacked the Chinese University of Hong Kong, aka the heart of all internet traffic in Hong Kong. Now, of course, this is eye-opening, but there's many who see this hack attack as a good thing. See, citizens want to know what their government's up to, and honestly, I myself would love to know if the NSA was rummaging through my chats. So a poll was conducted on June 10th and 11, and apparently 44% of Americans were on board with Snowden's outing. They were with him, and 42% of Americans say that he's a bad boy. 57% were not a fan of the NSA's action, while 37% were on board. 30% of folks liked the fact that they were being spied on. That's some weird kind of kink, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you want the NSA in your Dropbox? Let us know in the comments your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you.
In our number 2 spot today, we have caller information. In 2013, it was reported by The Guardian that, according to the documents that were leaked by Snowden, the Obama administration has allowed the NSA to collect different caller information from Verizon. This was done through what was called a quote business records provision of the Patriot Act that was established under the presidency of George W. Bush. It allowed the government to order Verizon to hand over caller information every single day. The information included things like the time, location, and duration of the call. The information began being collected under the Bush administration in 2001, and they were collected from AT&T, Verizon, and Bell South. Of course, once these documents were leaked and the information became public knowledge, US officials began trying to reassure the public that this surveillance was somehow necessary and was actually a program vital to national security, but many people rightfully felt like the spying was an unnecessary invasion of their privacy. This one is tricky because there certainly is a fine line with these things.
And finally, number 1. PowerPoint. Nothing sounds less cool than a leaked 41-slide PowerPoint presentation, but when it comes to the NSA, odds are it's going to be a little juicy. This slideshow is used to train US intelligence, and I gotta say, 41 pages? That's it? I did 45 on medieval knights in high school. Step your game up. This program called Prism cost about $20 million a year, and it was the highlight of this leak. Prism kicked off back in 2007. Originally, they partnered with Microsoft, but once they were attached to Apple come 2012, well, that's when things got a little bit fishy, as most things are with Apple, specifically their maps. That was horrible. The PowerPoint confirmed that the NSA has access to servers belonging to massive tech giants like Google, Skype, or even YouTube. Yeah, right here, they're listening right now. So your search history, emails, anything that rolls through those, usernames, passwords, well, they've got them. Even Skaterboy69 at Hotmail, odds are they're already looking. You're done. You're canceled, Brad. There was a summit in California which originally was tense. The United States were accusing China of cyber attacks, but right after Edward leaked this Prism tea, they didn't have much power at that summit. China and Europe's citizens weren't too pleased here, and honestly, yeah, it's a botched meeting. I can understand why.
Starting us off at number 10 is Elms Hotel and Spa. Located in Missouri, some believe this hotel might just be the most haunted in the entire state. Originally built in 1888, just 10 years after its construction, the Elms Elms Hotel was destroyed by a fire. It was a tragic event, but luckily no one lost their lives. But what's mysterious is that in 1910, the hotel went up in flames once more. Again, no one lost their lives, but this time, passersby noticed something. It appeared as though a spirit was walking around the embers, and rumors began circulating that somehow the mysterious entity had lit the flames. But just who exactly is this spooky arson demon, and why did they burn down the hotel? More importantly, if it was them, what made them stop? And it's not just fire maniac ghosts that haunt these halls. Another commonly seen apparition is that of a grieving woman who wanders the halls looking for her little one. But make no mistake, though she may be grieving, she is an angry entity. She'll pull at their hair or throw objects across the room while they are asleep to try and get your attention. Maybe she believes the guests are who took her little one from her, or maybe she is just angry to have visitors there. But either way, if I were you, I would not stay the night if you're looking for a peaceful sleep. Coming in at number 9, the Biltmore Hotel. Back in 1929, New York gangster Thomas "Fatty" Walsh was staying in the Everglades suite on the 13th floor of the Biltmore Hotel in Florida. Apparently, Fatty routinely stayed here and used the suite as a speakeasy and casino for him and his friends. However, after a heated argument over gambling debts, Fatty was shot by fellow mobster Edward Wilson and died right on the scene, and it appears he has never left. Once a player, still a player, the New York gangster is notorious for appearing only to women who he deems attractive and tricks them into visiting him on the 13th floor. One woman recounted her stay with her husband and said while in the elevator, all of a sudden, the doors opened on the 13th floor, despite that neither of them had requested that floor. They waited a moment and the doors wouldn't close, so the woman stepped out to see what was going on. As soon as she did, the doors slammed behind her on the elevator and it continued its journey to the lobby. The husband, worried for his wife, tried to reach the 13th floor but was unable, so he went back to their suite only to find his wife beside herself and outright spooked. She said when the doors shut behind her, she heard a maniacal laugh and the smell of cigar smoke. On top of Fatty's ghost, other entities are routinely seen walking through the walls, slamming doors, or watching you sleep. So it's a no for me. Coming in at number 8 is Hawthorne Hotel. While this entire Salem hotel is said to be haunted by several different entities, the rooms you really need to be afraid of are 612 and 325. Room 612 and the 6th floor in general is where the apparition of a woman is often seen roaming the halls, who many believe is the ghost of Bridget Bishop, the first woman executed during the witch trials. Accused of bewitching 5 other women, she died in 1692 and remains haunting the property, seeking revenge for her life taken too soon. Those that stay in this room report a strong smell of apples, which most think has to do with the fact that she owned an apple orchard on the land where the hotel was built in 1925. But of course, it is her frightening apparition that stares at you while you sleep that is really unsettling. As for room 325, it's believed the entities that haunt this room may have been past guests. No one is quite sure why they are there, but these entities are definitely frightening. Guests report lights turning on and off with no explanation, as well as water faucets doing the same within the room. While lying on the bed, guests have reported experiencing an extreme level of cold, with many reporting being grabbed or tugged at while trying to fall asleep. Plus, at night, it's said the screams and cries of the past guests can be heard echoing in the room. But what's strange is it never seems to occur anywhere else in the building. Coming in at number 7, Fort Garry Hotel. Built in 1903, since its doors opened to the public, many famous figures have stayed overnight, including Queen Elizabeth II, King George VI, Louis Armstrong, even Liberace. But don't let the star-studded guest list ease your suspicions. This place is straight up frightening, especially room 202, where it said a woman took her own life by hanging in the closet. Those that have dared to stay in the haunted room claim they saw blood drip down the walls and that a terrifying woman wearing a cloak would appear out of nowhere, often hovering over the foot of the bed while you sleep at night. What's even scarier is that some say she will crawl into the bed with you and that you can feel her cold, ghostly frame wrap around you. But it's not just the room where you might run into the spooky ghoul. She's known to haunt the hotel lounge as well, where staff and guests alike claim to hear loud cries coming from the same corner. I mean, unless you're looking to literally cuddle up with a ghost, I would steer clear of this one. Coming in at number 6, the Fairmont Hotel. While many of us know Banff for the gorgeous, picturesque Rocky Mountains, the famous Fairmont Hotel also has a dark secret. Room 873. As the story goes, years and years ago, an entire family was killed in this very room. After a long investigation, the room was refurbished and went back into the usual cycle. But soon the hotel staff were receiving many disturbances about the room that sent their blood running cold. Guests said they would fall asleep only to be awoken by screams, and that when the lights turned off, bloody handprints would be found on the mirrors. Staff would rush to the room to investigate, but all seemed to have disappeared by the time they got there. Afraid of what lurked inside, the room was sealed shut and never to be entered again. And if you go there now, no trace of the room exists. There is only a long hallway where a door used to be, and if you knock along the wall, you'll hear a hollow noise where it's believed the room was once sealed up many years ago. But just because they've locked up this door doesn't mean the terrifying ghosts were trapped inside. It seems room 692 has taken over as the most haunted room in the joint, and the same kinds of frightening phenomena continue. And if that weren't enough, it's also reported the ghost of a bride is seen dancing in the ballroom. It said she tragically lost her life on her wedding day after tripping down the stairs, breaking her neck, and being set ablaze by nearby candles. Some guests claim to have witnessed her on fire walking through the halls, and who knows, she might just come and haunt you in room 692. Coming in at number 5, the Empress Hotel. Located in Victoria, British Columbia, the Empress Hotel is a decadent building known to be visited by some of the most elite of our society. But don't be fooled by its gorgeous exterior and extravagant decor. It just might be one of the most haunted hotels in all of Canada. There are many ghost stories told about this hotel, like the construction worker who was working during the 1960s and came across a shadowy figure hanging from the chandelier, only to discover a staff member had taken their life in that very room exactly 1 year prior. Guests also report an elderly woman in pajamas who'll knock at your door in the middle of the night asking for help finding her room, only to take you to the elevator and disappear right before your eyes. It's believed she was a ghost who haunted a room that has since been demolished due to the need for more elevators, hence her confusion and disappearance as soon as she steps foot into one. Others, like the building's architect and a young girl, haunt the building, but the most frightening spirit is the maid Lizzie. Back in 1909, 1 year after the hotel's opening, Lizzie stepped out onto the hotel fire escape to say her rosary, as she did every night. But this time, unbeknownst to poor Lizzie, the contractor had disassembled the platform, and so Lizzie plummeted to her death from the 6th story. Guests who now stay anywhere on the 6th floor claim to have seen her walk through walls or hear her screams late at night, and believe she is out seeking revenge on the worker responsible for the end of her life. Coming in at number 4, Tubac Golf Resort and Spa. It's one thing to witness the sight of a ghost, but in my opinion, it's a whole other terror to be physically grabbed or moved by one. According to one hotel worker back in 2010, they ended up having to work late, so instead of going home, he just decided to stay the night in the Otero Ranch House. The ranch house had long been associated with ghostly apparitions and frightening tales, but the staff member was exhausted and it was the only room available, so he figured he would take his chances. When he got in, he decided to lay down on the couch and watch some TV for a bit before heading to bed, when suddenly he felt it move, and not just a little. According to the staff member, the entire couch lifted up off the floor, and with him in it, jerked several feet towards the TV. He was immediately freaked out, but before he could get up off the couch, the curtains that hung across the room from him lifted up and came down with a swoosh on top of him. Needless to say, he immediately bolted from the room and did not dare spend the rest of the night. Although he still works at the resort, he has never again stepped foot in the Otero Ranch and will choose sleeping in his car over ever staying a minute in the haunted room. Coming in at number 3, Hotel Provincial. Branded as one of the most haunted places in New Orleans, the Hotel Provincial is located in the infamously haunted French Quarter. Back in the day, there was a military hospital just down the street from the hotel, and one of the buildings used a medicinal herb garden for the hospital, which seems a little strange, but does make sense when you find out the kinds of spirits that haunt the halls. Today, the hotel consists of 5 buildings, and although ghosts are known to lurk in each, the most haunted building is believed to be number 5. Guests of building number 5 have reported seeing insane things, such as Confederate soldiers covered in blood, moaning from agonizing pain, who miraculously disappear once the lights turn on. Others have reported apparitions of surgeons in the halls, and maybe most disturbing is the amount of guests that have seen strange pools of blood appear on their bedding or the floor that disappear just as fast as they came into view. One guest even reported that as the elevator door opened on the hotel's second floor, the hospital was entirely in view. So it seems as though the soldiers that died in the hospital down the street took a liking to the hotel and continued to haunt all the visitors who enter to this day. Coming in at number 2, Ottawa Jail Hostel. As you probably already figured out from the name, once upon a time this building was a jail. It opened its doors to the public in 1862 and quickly became the site of many public executions. On top of that, living conditions were harsh, with small, cold, and windowless cells that only had a small hole to allow for airflow. But things didn't start getting spooky until years later. After the building was converted into the hostel it is today, the parking lot was partially excavated to build a bridge, but to the construction workers' horror, the remains of 140 bodies were uncovered on the ground, and it's believed that all 140 bodies were prisoners who lost their life to execution. The most famous inmate was Patrick James Whelan, a man who up until his last breath pleaded he was not guilty of his convicted crime. What's worse is that he was told his body would be transported back to Montreal after his execution, but this promise was not kept, and they laid him to rest on the prison grounds. Angry and out for revenge, many guests say they have seen him or even been the victim of his wrath during their stay. One guest in particular, who made it very clear that she didn't even believe in ghosts prior to her stay, said at 1 o'clock in the morning she was woken by someone grabbing her arm and trying to pull her out of the bed. Her friend, who was across the room from her, woke when the girl screamed, "Let me go," into the darkness, and the two were both so frightened they couldn't fall back asleep. And last up, in our number 1 spot, La Pavilion Hotel. Just minutes away from the notorious French Quarter lies the luxurious Pavilion Hotel. But despite its lavish exterior, it is believed to be the home to over 100 spirits. And some paranormal investigators even believe the building sits on top of a portal to the other side. An interesting theory, considering the building's less than ideal history. Although today the area is a tourist hotspot, back in the 19th century, the ground where La Pavilion sits was deemed completely inhospitable and incredibly dangerous. It was the frequent spot for foul deeds and late night killings, which is likely why so many spirits reside in the hotel's 4 walls. Among the most talked about are a couple seen dressed in beautiful clothing roaming around with googly eyes. The couple will enter an elevator, but then it never goes anywhere. Instead, the usual ping sound rings loudly and the doors open up again, revealing no one inside. Many also claim to have witnessed a young woman on the 9th floor reported to have died on the steps of the hotel, but the truly terrifying entity only reveals herself at night. One guest staying on the most notoriously haunted 9th floor said that in the middle of the night he was woken by a woman dressed in all black sitting at the foot of his bed. He was speechless and terrified and went to scream, but the entity leaned in, ran her icy cold fingers through his hair and said, "You belong to me. I'll never let you go." Needless to say, he never returned, and I do not blame him. If I ever saw that lady in my room, I would be running as fast as I could.
Number 10, Bragg Road, Saratoga. The Big Thicket in southeast Texas is a dense forested area that runs along the Alabama border, and there are very few roads that cut through it. One of the most infamous is Bragg Road. In 1904, the road was built as a rail line to connect the now abandoned town of Bragg to the now thriving Saratoga. While the rails have long since been torn up, some ghostly reminders of the past still remain. When you drive down this lonely 8-mile long dirt road at night, you, like thousands of others before you, are sure to see what are known as the ghost lights. Basketball-sized orbs of light that float and dance through the air, even changing in color according to some. There are a few stories on what these lights actually are. The most popular story is that a tragedy occurred on a midnight train run. The conductor, sleep deprived from a long journey through the state, needed some fresh air to wake himself up. He stuck his head out the window, and in a freak accident, he was decapitated by a tree. And now his spirit is wandering the road, searching for his lost head. The other prevailing theory is that the light is a ghostly lantern belonging to a groom whose bride left him at the altar. He went searching for her in the forest at night, but has still never found her to this day. Number 9. Baker Hotel, Mineral Wells. Mineral Wells is known for its, you guessed it, mineral-rich water. In the 1880s, people would travel from all over Texas to drink some, and it supposedly had healing powers and could cure almost any ailment. And with that kind of tourist attraction, you need somewhere for all of these folks to stay. And so, in 1929, the Baker Hotel was opened. With 14 floors and 450 rooms, it was the biggest hotel for miles, and it used the mineral water as a draw for all sorts of people. To this day, workers and visitors alike find small things missing from their pockets or bags while touring the grounds, and workers have later found them on the floor in the Baker Suite, the room where the owner lived and died. They also report the smell of cigar smoke in the air, another habit of Mr. Baker, further proving his presence. But there are also some less friendly spirits here, notably that of the chopped bellhop, who lost his life in a freak elevator accident that saw his top half removed from the bottom half of his body. He's seen floating sans legs and screaming to be made whole again. Workers recommend you stay away, lest you meet the same fate. Known for its programs in engineering, technology, and agriculture, Texas A&M is one of the most highly regarded universities in the state. But the engineering building is home to not only future engineers, but the spirit of a former worker. In 1959, Roy Sims was the foreman for the meat locker in what was then the Animal Industries building. He was showing his assistant some tips on butchering bacon, and when the assistant stepped out to get them both some coffee, the knife slipped and Sims accidentally sliced his leg, severing his femoral artery in the process. The assistant returned to see Roy bleeding out on the floor and called an ambulance, but it was too late, and he passed away. Students and faculty alike report strange happenings in the building to this day. Noises and crashes, cool breezes when all the windows and doors are shut, and even objects moving or being out of place. And many attribute this to the ghost of Roy Sims just trying to get back to work. Number 7. Lake Highlands High School, Dallas. Imagine being back in high school, and during a rehearsal for the school play, the lights suddenly go out, and when they come back on, costumes have moved, props have crashed to the floor, and you see a ghostly apparition rise back up to the rafters. This is exactly what some students and faculty have reported at the Dallas High School. Reportedly, the ghost is that of a former student, Elizabeth, who took her own life jumping from the roof of the auditorium. While many attribute the cold spots and strange noises to the wind, there is no denying that there was a student named Elizabeth who attended the school around the same time the urban legend takes place and passed away, though the cause remains unclear. Number 6 on our list, the Ritz Theater in Corpus Christi. While there are no accounts of specific deaths associated with what was once South Texas's most beautiful theater, there are certainly enough ghostly happenings to make anyone's skin crawl. Paranormal investigators have reported that while walking through the now crumbling building, you can feel cold spots, hear voices, and see orbs floating through the air, some of which they've actually been able to catch on camera. Perhaps these are spirits who never managed to move on, or maybe they're happy right where they are, enjoying a pleasant night out at the theater in the afterlife. We won't know until somebody asks. Number 5. Jefferson Hotel, Jefferson. Originally built in 1851 as a cotton warehouse, the Jefferson Hotel has had haunting stories for decades. To this day, workers who were once skeptical of spirits have been converted to believers after dishes have gone flying, phantom footsteps were heard, and the front switchboard lit up as though the rooms were talking to each other, even when the hotel was closed to guests. Many attribute this to the ghost of Elizabeth, common ghost name I guess, who took her own life in the hotel after her soon-to-be husband sent a note that he would not be coming to the wedding. This has been verified by newspapers to have happened in the 1870s, and there have been sightings of a woman in white roaming the halls of the hotel ever since. Number 4. Hendley Row, Galveston. One of the oldest still operating commercial buildings in the city, Hendley Row has seen many occupants throughout its time. Most notably, it was a watchtower during the American Civil War. Some have reported a soldier on the roof of the building at night watching out for Union Army members. There are also many spirits who appear soaked and wet from the 1900 storm that they and 12,000 others lost their lives in. However, my favorite story from this building is actually more recent. The manager of the market was gifted a photo of Dr. Wilbur, a man who had lived and died in the buildings many years before, and they decided to hang it in the market as a historical artifact. When Hurricane Ike hit the city in 2008 and left the the building in 10 feet of water, damaging so much of the property, the picture remained unharmed, despite falling in the water. During their annual Day of the Dead celebration, the photo is included on the altar, along with many other objects and candles. With a 3-person rotation to ensure it's done, the candles are extinguished at night. Yet every year, the candles are mysteriously already burning the next morning. Number 3. Haunted Train Tracks, San Antonio. On a dark night in 1936, at the rail crossing on Shane Road just outside of San Antonio, a tragedy occurred which would rock the state to its core. An after-hours event at the local elementary school had many students staying late that night, and the school bus service was diverted till later in the evening. When it was time to go, students loaded up and headed home. Unfortunately for some, this would be their last ride. The bus had been working better than ever all evening, the bus driver noted, and suddenly it stalled out on the rail tracks. The driver tried and tried to restart the vehicle, but it was no use. Then suddenly a train appeared. Its lamp must have been out, and it was too late to move the bus, even if it was working. The driver began to carry students off the bus as fast as he could, but then the bus was hit by the train side on, and the driver was thrown from the window. 10 students survived, but many others didn't. After recovering from his injuries and leaving the hospital weeks later, the bus driver got in his car and returned to the rail crossing that night. Haunted by grief, he drove his car onto the tracks, turned it off, and hurled his keys into the night, determined to take his own life. And when he saw the train charging down the tracks, he suddenly felt the car rolling forward, all the way off the tracks and out of harm's way. When he inspected his car, he saw multiple sets of small handprints on the back, perhaps those of the students, not wishing for his life to be lost in the same way theirs had. Number 2. Hotel Galvez, Galveston. After the devastating hurricane in 1900 that left many dead and much of the town destroyed, Galveston decided to rebuild. And with that came the Hotel Galvez. Many spirits are said to be lurking the grounds, even to this day, but the most infamous of them all is Audra. In 1952, she was staying in room 501, while her fiancé was out at sea working on a cargo vessel. When news came from the company that their ship had sunk and all hands on board were lost, Audra decided to end her life in the hotel room that night. But a few days later, her betrothed returned to the hotel. Reports had been wrong and he had survived the shipwreck, and elated to see his fiancée, he threw open the doors to room 501 and saw her body. Distraught, he then took his own life, laying next to her on the bed. And finally, we reach your number 1 most suggested haunted place in Texas, Goatman's Bridge. This bridge in Denton once led to the homestead of a farmer, the Goat Man, who was renowned for the quality of his farm's milk, cheeses, and meat. The former owner of the land never saw any such success while he operated the farm, and in a booze-fueled fit of jealousy, he attacked the farmer, put a rope around his neck, and threw him from the side of the bridge. He then returned to the homestead and burned it to the ground, taking the lives of the family and the livestock. When he returned to the bridge to check on his gruesome handiwork, he looked below only to see an empty noose. He then heard 3 loud metal clangs, like someone was knocking on the bridge. And then suddenly behind him, a large, ghostly man with a goat for a head appeared, put a noose around his neck, and threw him over the side of the bridge, taking revenge for himself and his family. Now they say that if you visit the old Alton Bridge at night and knock 3 times, you too will see the Goat Man. But be warned, he does not like to be disturbed. Number 10. White Rock Lake Park, Dallas. In 1943, the story of the ghost of White Rock was published in a Texas folklore publication, Backwoods to Border. The story goes that there was a young couple who was looking for somewhere they could be alone. They drove down a deserted road and parked on the shore of the lake. When they turned their headlights on, they saw someone walking towards them. A woman dressed in a white sheer dress who was soaking wet was coming closer and closer to their car. Concerned, they asked the woman if she was alright, and the woman then spoke and said, "I'm sorry to intrude, and I would not under any other circumstances, but I must find a way home immediately. My boat overturned, the others are safe, but I must get home." The couple agreed to take her home, and she gave them an address not too far away. As they drove off, the driver turned back to ask for some directions, but the backseat was empty and soaking wet. When they arrived at the address the woman in white gave them, a man answered the door, and when he was told what happened, he replied, "You are the 3rd couple who's come to me with this story. 3 weeks ago, while sailing on White Rock Lake, my daughter drowned. Many sightings have been reported since." Number 9. the Moody Mansion, Galveston. Before I get to the next entry, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so that I can keep bringing you the most amazing content. Before it was known as the Moody Mansion, it was the Willis Mansion. Built for Narcissa Willis in 1895, this 31-room mansion boasts a Romanesque architecture with ornate features like stained glass windows and hand-carved woodwork. She commissioned the house to be built against her late husband's wishes after he'd passed, spending the family inheritance in the process, something her 10 children did not appreciate. Unfortunately, she didn't get to live there long since she passed away in 1899, and it was then purchased by the Moody's. In 1900, a hurricane destroyed much of Galveston and took the lives of some 6,000 people, but strangely, the mansion stayed standing, untouched. Perhaps it was the ghost of Narcissa keeping her prized possession safe? Visitors to the house constantly report faces and spectral images showing up in photographs taken in the house, prompting paranormal investigators to come here to do research. Number 8. San Fernando Cathedral, San Antonio. The oldest church in the entire state of Texas has stood tall for nearly 300 years, and in that time it's collected many spirits, some of whom were buried within the walls of the church themselves. When searching for paranormal activity here, one of the first things researchers often see is a white horse trotting in front of the cathedral, only to disappear soon after. It's said that the horse was a gift from an Apache tribe that was refused and killed. Other ghosts that walk the grounds include that of a man dressed in black clothes from the 18th century who follows tours and then suddenly disappears, as well as those of monks who can be seen and heard standing at the back of the pews during services. Number 7. Demon's Road, Huntsville. Formerly known as Bowden Road, this seldom traveled dirt road is creepy enough without the ghost stories. It's overgrown, has misshapen trees, and in the dark seems like something right out of a horror movie. But there is at least one notable spirit who haunts travelers who dare come through here. A boy on a tricycle with glowing eyes has been reported by many people riding down the road. He appears in the middle of the road and stares you down until you approach him, and once you do, a thick fog rises from the ground and he disappears. There's one more story about Demon's Road that I found super interesting though. Two friends heard that the road was haunted and decided to check it out for themselves, and as they drove down it in the middle of the night, the trees seemed to shift and shake, and then they arrived at their destination at the end of Demon's Road, which just so happens to be the next entry on our list. Number 6. Martha Chapel Cemetery. When the two men drove up to the cemetery, which was named after the first person who was buried there, Martha Palmer, moonlight was piercing through the clouds and lighting the headstones and epitaphs before them. They both got out to crack a few brews and explore the cemetery, but when the driver decided to pour some on one of the graves, a skeletal hand burst from the ground, grabbing at his ankle and dragging him into the dirt. His friend and passenger ran over to help, kicking at the zombie-like arm and dragging him away. After he was freed, the driver called out for them to escape, and when he got back to his car, he looked back, but didn't see his friend who supposedly just saved his life. He was actually still sitting in the passenger seat, asleep. And as he peeled out and drove back down Demon's Road, his passenger slumped over into his lap, and the driver realized that his friend had died. Allegedly, he passed away from a heart attack on the drive to the cemetery. And in 2018, a video surfaced from someone who was exploring the Google Street View of the area and saw a ghostly image appear inside the cemetery. A creepy, pale face of a boy was behind a tree in one shot and missing in the next. There was also a large black figure in the background that did not seem to be human. Spooky stuff. Number 5. Miss Molly's Hotel, Fort Worth. Originally built in 1910 as the Palace Rooms, Fort Worth's first bed and breakfast, Miss Molly's, has had quite the history. During Prohibition, it became a speakeasy called the Oasis. In the 1940s, it became a brothel known as the Guyette Hotel, and after that was shut down, it became Miss Molly's. There have been many reports of unwanted guests appearing here, most notably those of Jake the Cowboy and Josie King, the former madam of the brothel, both of whom are seen as full-body apparitions. Workers and visitors alike have witnessed them walking through locked doors, books being thrown, items disappearing and reappearing in random places, and strangely, change being neatly organized in certain rooms. In room 3, indents on the edge of the bed have appeared as though someone were suddenly sitting on it and shaking the bed while guests sleep. You know, I think Little Richard said it best. Good golly, Miss Molly. Number 4. The Grove, Jefferson. This house, built in 1861, has had many owners over the years, and most would agree that the place is cursed. Since its construction, most of the owners of the house have experienced some sort of tragedy. The original owner lost his cotton factory due to a freak flood, and a lynch mob committed horrible atrocities on the properties, where 4 freed slaves were brutalized and hung from trees on the property. The spirits of these men are said to be the most active spirits on the property. Later owners saw multiple family members take their own lives on the property, and some developed rare diseases. The spirits here are quite restless, and there are reports abound of books flying off shelves, mirrors shattering, voices telling people to do horrible things to themselves, and full-on ghostly apparitions that appear and disappear at will. All of these things show that the Grove definitely belongs on this list. Number 3, the Black Swan Inn, San Antonio. There is no relation to the 2010 film here, but the strange happenings have messed up people's minds just as much as Natalie Portman's characters was. The land that the inn now stands on has major ties to indigenous peoples from some 7,000 years ago, and is also a former battle site for the war between the Texan and Mexican army in 1842. But 35 years later, a dairy farm was founded on the land by a German immigrant. The blood-soaked soil here seems to be a bad place to build, as tragedy struck many who lived on the land. The farmer's wife passed away from cancer she developed shortly after moving in, and 2 years later, he decided to join her by taking his own life. Soon after, the property was purchased by 2 families and renamed the White Gables. However, at the age of 38, one of the new owners, Jolene Street, also passed away due to cancer, and like the owners before them, her husband hung himself in the bedroom. The inn that now stands has had reports of the spirits of the former owners wandering the halls with their necks broken, pushing guests off of their beds, and generally getting up to no good. No matter which way you slice it, this property seems cursed. Number 2, the Hill House, Mineral Springs. In part 2, I talked about the haunted Baker Hotel in Mineral Springs, but it seems that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, because just behind the Baker Hotel lies one of the most haunted places in Texas, the Hill House. Many people stay in this house attempting to witness paranormal activity, and most of them get more than they bargained for, and don't make it through the night without leaving terrified. The owners of the house, who purchased it in 2017 knowing its haunted history, rent it out to individuals and paranormal research teams looking to witness something terrifying. And apparently about 50% of them, including the professionals, leave within the first night. This is due to a spirit or entity that resides here named Toby, who growls loudly in your ear to get out, knocks things over, slams doors, and even gets violent. Videos show all sorts of terrible things happening to people who stay here, like a woman who was taunting the spirits, trying to make something happen, being viciously pulled off of her bed, leaving her bruised. And when she returned a year later, for some reason, she was scratched by something invisible in the room so badly that blood leaked through her shirt. Whoever Toby is, it seems like he doesn't want anyone else to come into his house and will do anything to keep them out. Number 1, Old Town Spring. While the rest of the entries on this list and my other 2 videos have had some terrifying places, our number 1 spot belongs to an entire town that is haunted, and some even say cursed. Allegedly, in the 1700s, a curse was cast by members of the Akokisa tribe on the town and its people who stole their land and killed their kin. And this curse has followed the town all the way through history, continuing even today. Every building in this small town has a haunting story, and I'll share a few of them with you now, but I encourage you to look this up because there are so many more that I just can't get to today. The Whitehall House was built in 1895 and has since been converted into a funeral home, and they have a special room upstairs designated as the Ghost Room, where the spirits of the dead who haunt the building can reside. Figures are seen walking through the door, dancing on the balcony, and heard inside. One of the previous owners decided to renovate the room and experienced, quote, violent spirit activity, and it took years for the ghosts to calm back down. There are now 2 new clauses in the lease agreement for the building. The Ghost Room is not to be disturbed, and you can't break the lease due to a haunting. Many of the buildings in town can be seen with trees growing closely and even through some of the buildings, and allegedly the curse placed upon the town ensured that if anyone cut down any trees, they would experience a terrible fire. And this has happened inexplicably many times to many different buildings in the town, and some quite recent. There is also a hanging tree where a judge sentenced more than 60 people to death, which is an insane rate even by the standards of any time. And the old ice house, which was used to store corpses waiting to be sent to the funeral home, has a heavy energy, and everything goes quiet when you get near it. And it's burned down countless times. You know, with all of these creepy things going on throughout the years, it is no wonder people think Old Town Spring is cursed, and a no-brainer that it ended up number 1 on this list, and it might even be above the number 1s in part 1 and 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Number 10, Driscoll Hotel, Austin. While there are many reportedly haunted hotels in Texas, this one seems to top many lists for the most ghostly activity. Most of this seems to stem from the very chilling stories of room 525. In the 1880s, there was a young couple that was having their wedding at the hotel, or at least that was the plan. The groom got cold feet and left the bride at the altar. Now, heartbroken, she ran upstairs to their suite, room 525, and took her own life. And it said she still walks the halls in her long white gown. But that isn't the end of the story, because in 1991, another bride was spurned at the altar, and after going on a shopping spree with the groom's stolen credit card, she too returned to room 525 and took her own life. Since then, guests have seen her carrying a pistol and walking into the room, all without ever opening the door. So don't stay in room 525 or you may never check out. There's also an eerie painting that's said to be inhabited by the spirit of a young girl, the daughter of a senator, whose expression seems to change on its own. People who view the painting have said that they feel like they were floating off of the ground, though they remained on the floor. They also say that their equilibrium and balance was off for a few hours after looking at her. Number 9, USS Lexington, Corpus Christi. Now before I tell you about this spooky ship, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can catch all of our amazing videos. As a naval vessel that saw actual battle, there have been multiple lives that were lost on board, including that of an engine room operator who still roams the ship at night waiting for the battle to end. The crew of the ship have often reported flickering lights and doors slamming on their own, which, given that this is a very well-maintained historical site, you'd think that they would have found the cause by now. Maybe it's just the ghosts of sailors lost to time. Coming in at number 8, we have the Marfa Lights in, you guessed it, the town of Marfa. While there is so much beauty in the area and plenty of non-spooky reasons to visit, the main tourist attraction to this quaint little town are floating, sourceless lights that seem to change color and even move in the night sky. Many visitors make the journey at all times of year to see the lights, and there's even a yearly festival made in their honor. Reported since 1883 by people of all ages and professions, no one knows what these floating orbs are. They appear at random, but usually in the same area of the sky, and since there's so much open space and low light pollution, it's perfect for stargazing, or seeing spooky orbs, I guess. Some say that these lights are UFOs, some say spirits, and others think that they're just headlights. All that I know is that if I see a mysterious floating orb, I'm going the other way. Number 7. Woman Hollering Creek, San Antonio. Said to be the home of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, this creepy creek leaves anyone who visits with a sense of dread. As the story goes, La Llorona was a woman who was distraught that her once doting, affectionate husband left her for another woman. And after confronting him and leaving the confrontation with cuts and bruises, she waded into the water, dressed in her best clothes, and drowned herself in the creek, right after doing the same to the rest of her family. Her chilling screams for her children can be heard all the way from the highway, giving her and the creek its very apt name. Many people have felt themselves being drawn towards the water by ghostly voices, and some have even been tugged towards the bank of the creek. Perhaps it's La Llorona looking for her next victim. The screams heard and feelings of being pulled into the water have mostly been reported by younger people, making this all the more terrifying given what La Llorona did. Number 6. El Paso High School. Now, when you're thinking of haunted places, a school isn't exactly the first place that comes to mind, but this one has quite a story. In 1985, the graduating class received their yearbooks, and when basking in the nostalgia of their group photo, they noticed something odd. A woman who no one could identify was in the picture with them. Now, obviously, that would be quite concerning. I know I'd be freaked out if there was someone I'd never seen before standing next to me in a picture. The blurry apparition still has not been identified to this day, but some think it's a student who fell from a window years before who never got to graduate. I say give her the diploma. She's already in the yearbook. Sticking in El Paso, in our number 5 spot is the Plaza Theater Performing Arts Center. As someone who loves the theater, I try to see as many shows as I can, but I think I'll skip visiting this theater, no matter how good the production is. Built in 1930 as a movie house, demolished for a parking lot in the late 80s, and rebuilt as a live theater space, this building has seen many changes, but some things have stayed constant throughout its history. Many workers of the building have reported seeing a man in one of the box seats, in a tuxedo, smoking a cigarette. One crew member recalls seeing him after turning on the stage lights, sitting alone in the box, as though he'd been there for hours already before the lights came on. And when she saw the smoking man, he turned to her and said, "We all have our time to die. and then threw himself headfirst over the balcony, vanishing before he could hit the ground. A former vice president of the theater also recalls seeing a ghostly girl bouncing a ball in the aisles of the theater and always staring. He also noticed that there was a rag doll that seemed to appear and disappear on its own, moving to locations that it couldn't have without someone's help. Even locked doors didn't seem to stop it from appearing in the projection booth. Number 4. Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Established in 1951, this abandoned hospital has been named one of the most haunted places in America. And since over 2,000 patients are said to have died within its walls before it shuttered its doors in 1992, I can see why. Reports of apparitions of people in hospital gowns running through the corridors or hiding in rooms are numerous, along with moving wheelchairs, disembodied voices, and footsteps. But there are some who have even more chilling stories. While exploring the halls and rooms that have remained largely untouched since its closure, some ghost hunters have been touched, had their clothes tugged on, or even pushed to the ground while being given a ghostly warning. Some of the spirits are believed to be that of patients who had illegal medical experiments performed on them and lost their lives in the process, making for a very vengeful ghost. Number 3. The Screaming Bridge in Arlington. On the night of February 4th, 1961, 6 from the local high school were taking a drive after seeing a movie earlier in the evening. While driving down Bedford Road toward the rail crossing bridge, which had mysteriously been burned down a few years previous, only rebuilt earlier that year, they were startled by another car reversing and honking its horn wildly. This caused the driver to speed up out of fear, and not realizing that the bridge was out, the car careened over the edge and crashed into the other side of the ravine. Unfortunately, 3 of them lost their lives that night, and their screams of terror can still be heard by anyone traveling the renamed Greenbelt Road. The saddest part of this story is that the car that startled them was being driven by a man who had just barely avoided going over the edge of the broken bridge himself, and he was reversing and honking to warn them of the danger ahead. The entire area, now known as Death Crossing, is now blocked off and no traffic travels through. At number 2 on our list, we have La Carafe in Houston. This historic bar, built originally as a bakery in 1860, has been serving patrons for decades, but many come not only for the drinks, but for a paranormal experience. Bartenders and visitors alike have seen apparitions of a hulking man walking upstairs and hearing his giant footsteps pacing the floor. No one knows who this may be, but some say he died there from some nefarious means. The former manager of the bar can also be seen staring out of the top floor window, looking over his patrons and ensuring they're having a good time. And he seems a bit more friendly. However, there are some that report the sounds of a body being dragged across the floor above, but when the sound is followed, nothing's there. Makes you wonder what happened upstairs. And since it's one of the oldest buildings in the city that's been in continuous use, it's become a tourist hotspot and a historical site. Personally, I won't be stopping in for a drink anytime soon, no matter how good the cocktails are. And finally, number 1, the Alamo. While students are taught to remember the Alamo, they don't really teach about all of the spirits who can never forget. In the infamous battle, thousands of soldiers lost their lives, and many were dumped into mass graves and others left to rot out in the sun, so it makes sense that you'd have some pissed off ghosts wandering the ground. There have been countless reports of soldier apparitions walking with weapons in hand, taking their usual patrol, and even full platoons screaming and charging into battle. Even in the afterlife they couldn't get away from war, and so they continue to fight their invisible enemy. There are also accounts of a small blonde-haired boy hiding in multiple places where the gift shop now stands, so make sure to pick up your haunted keychains. While the buildings are beautiful to look at and the area is interesting to explore, the history can leave one with a haunting feeling, and with all those spirits around, I'd be careful touring here, especially at night.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Blue Leaks. In June of 2020, following the killing of George Floyd and the protests, Anonymous leaked hundreds of gigabytes of law enforcement files. It has been named the Blue Leaks. Over 269 gigabytes of data were taken from over 200 law enforcement agencies. This included emails, audio recordings, videos, and documents. In total, there were millions of files leaked. Some of the leaked documents show that the FBI was monitoring the social media accounts of protesters, and they were also alerting local law enforcement about anti-police messages. Other documents showed that the FBI was tracking Bitcoin donations to protest groups, as well as highlighted some scandals and police misconduct. In our 9th spot, we have Trump's dirty laundry, and I don't mean like literally his stinky socks and undies. In May of 2020, Anonymous came after Trump during his presidency. This happened when Trump threatened to deploy his military force against the protesters. But Anonymous was like, nah, honey, you aren't doing that, and said they had dirt on him. They said that they would publish his dirty laundry. A couple of days later, they published 169 emails that mentioned Trump one way or another. Now, most of the emails weren't even bad, but it was just a scare tactic to show Trump, like, hey, we're not bluffing, okay? We got dirt on you. More on this in my next point. Coming in at number 8, we have Trump's connection to Jeffrey Epstein. So like I said, Anonymous leaked some emails about Trump. Well, they also threatened to release information connecting Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Trump and Epstein have been photographed together on a number of occasions. Apparently, they also have hung out with each other too. Some believe that Trump was a part of Epstein's ring and also exploited young females. And Anonymous apparently has proof, including access to Epstein's address book and old court documents. Technically, I'm cheating with this point since they didn't leak this information, but they did expose that they have this information. In our 7th spot, we have the Brazilian government. In June of 2020, Anonymous released personal information on the Brazilian president and his family and cabinet. This caused a lot of chaos. The federal police and the Brazilian Congress began to investigate. In the end, it was revealed that the federal government used $2 million of the public's money to fund advertising on several websites. Most of the websites supported the president, which makes sense as to why they wanted to put money into them. Not only that, but Anonymous leaked a number of government officials' addresses, income, and other personal information. The personal addresses were a very serious issue because it puts them at risk for attacks. Moving on, at number 6, we have CSIS documents. So what I didn't know is that apparently Anonymous has some beef with the Canadian government. One of their first attacks leaked secrets about the foreign activities of the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, aka the CSIS. It released information about the size of their network, what information they have access to, along with other sensitive government documents. The Canadian government has only admitted to having foreign stations in Washington, London, and Paris. But according to the documents leaked, they have over 25 foreign stations. And I quote, many of which are located in developing countries and/or unstable environments. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the secret federal document. In another attack against Canada, Anonymous leaked top secret documents outlining the redevelopment of Canada's key diplomatic centers in Britain, including selling, relocating, and refurbishing Canada's diplomatic buildings in London. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's the fact that they got a hold of these top secret documents that's concerning. The documents were marked as confidence of the Queen's Privy Council, which basically means that it's top secret and private documents. Therefore, the government of Canada is looking into its own people to see if someone among them is leaking these documents to Anonymous, or maybe they're a part of Anonymous. In our 4th spot, we have the #OpsWakeUp21. In January of 2021, Anonymous attacked the government of Malaysia. They defaced 17 government and university websites. This was part of their campaign called #OpsWakeUp21. Basically, the purpose of this campaign was to highlight the poor security of the government's websites and to warn people about it. In a post, they said, and I quote, "Greetings, we are Anonymous Malaysia. This is message to Government Malaysia. Your security system is low. All data may be leaked. This can cause unwanted hackers selling all your information." Basically, they accused the government for keeping silent and covering up a number of data breaches that occurred over the years. The government knew that personal information of their citizens was being obtained and sold, and they just kinda covered it up until Anonymous exposed them. Coming in at number 3, we have Anonymous Malaysia Part 2. During the Anonymous Malaysia attack, they also revealed that Facebook was selling private information to government agencies. In a post, Anonymous said, and I quote, "If you're a hacktivist willing to, or a man who just wants to protect his freedom of information and join the cause, and kill Facebook for your own privacy. Facebook has sold information to government agencies and gave secret access to information security firms so they can spy on people from around the world. You can't hide from reality where you are. You're neither safe from any government. Someday you'll look back on this and realize what we've done here is right. You'll thank the internet government. We will not harm you, but we will save you. Okay guys, it is time to deactivate Facebook. Nice. Coming in at number 2, we have Epic. In September of 2021, Anonymous leaked data from Epic, which is basically a domain registrar and a web hosting company that has provided service to websites that publish neo-Nazi and extremist content. It's a pretty controversial platform, and Anonymous leaked details of every domain that was ever hosted or registered through them. It also leaked a number of personal information of their customers, like their purchase records, emails, invoices, and credit card information. Over 15 million email addresses were exposed. In fact, they released 3 rounds of data on their website. The first was in February of 2021, the second in September, and the third in October. In October, they actually leaked information on documents belonging to the Texas Republican Party. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the NSA. So thanks to Edward Snowden, we all know that the NSA was spying on Americans through their phone records. Well, Anonymous just exposed the existence of a secret NSA and FBI program called PRISM. This program allows the NSA and FBI to take photos, videos, emails, and chats from the servers of 9 different internet companies, including Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple. Anonymous leaked 13 huge documents about this program, and it revealed that the NSA is not only spying on Americans, but also citizens of over 35 different countries as well. Anonymous said, and I quote, "We bring this to you so that you know just how little rights you have. Your privacy and freedoms are slowly being taken away from you in closed doors meetings, in laws buried in bills, and by people who are supposed to be protecting you."
Coming in at number 10, we have Who Killed Kennedy? Now, the story in the book says that Lee Harvey Oswald was the one who shot Kennedy on that day when he was in front of everyone in America. But we're not here to stick to the books. They don't keep all the secrets in the books. When you go back to the old footage, we see that there was for sure 2 shooters. So, who was the second shooter on that day? There also is a ton of motivation to have Kennedy killed. He was starting to crack down on organized crime. He might have been sleeping with Marilyn Monroe. He was supporting the civil rights movement, and he wanted to make it law to give black people equal pay to white people. And there were a whole bunch of other things that Kennedy was trying to push that would have cost the super rich millions, maybe even billions. And after he was killed, his brother was killed, and Marilyn Monroe mysteriously had an overdose. And the guy who was accused of killing Kennedy was shot and killed before he could ever stand trial, so we never got the full story from this dude. The whole thing is wrapped in so much mystery, and we will probably never get to the bottom of this. Coming in at number 9, we have Harvey Weinstein. This was an open secret in Hollywood for a long time. When word came out that Harvey Weinstein was one of the most notorious rapists in Hollywood history, the world was shocked. But here's the thing. Everyone knew about this. Not like me, everyone, but everyone in show business. There was even a story of Courtney Love telling other women that if Harvey Weinstein ever invites you to the Four Seasons, don't go, because that's where he pulls all of his dirty tricks. Thankfully, all of the secrets about this man are out in the open, and now he has been thrown behind bars and will hopefully never be heard from again. Enjoy your twilight years while you're brutally beaten in jail. Good riddance. I only put this one at number 9 because it used to be a secret, but now everyone knows what's going on. Coming in at number 8, we have disinformation agent. So here's a tactic that will only be spouted as some mad rhetoric that some internet weirdos believe in, but here's the thing, it's absolutely real. Disinformation is something that the American government will use all the time to try and muddy the waters, so when information leaks out about their top secret experiments, no one finds out what they're actually up to. The information is mixed in with some of the bull crap that they made up, so you don't know what is true. A perfect example of this is the Roswell aliens. For decades, people believed that there were aliens flying through Roswell, that for whatever reason this was a hot spot that aliens wanted to visit. I don't know why they would want to go to a desert as their first place to visit on planet Earth. That is for sure not the best thing we have to offer. But that was a myth made up by the CIA. The reason they did this was because they were testing experimental aircrafts in the area. If these UFOs were ever spotted and people thought they were aliens, they would never try to investigate them as American military devices, and this would keep all of the American military projects secret. Coming in at number 7, we have Area 51. That being said, there are some squirrely things that are going on in Area 51 that we don't know about. The rumors about this place are endless. Some say that they have everything locked away in this secret location. I mean, we're talking about secret weapons that could demolish entire cities. Things that would make a nuke look like a bow and arrow. There are rumors that the future of space travel is locked away in this place, that they have spaceships that can move faster than the speed of light, which is supposed to be impossible, but the eggheads at Area 51 might have found a way to do it. Element 115 is supposed to be one of the most powerful compounds on the planet and the fuel to all these futuristic spaceships. That's supposed to be locked away down there. Alien life is apparently down there too. Can you guys just open it up for a little while so we could run through and take a bunch of pictures of the stuff? Like, please, come on, be cool. Coming in at number 6, we have who you are. Here's something you don't think about all the time, but the American government is constantly working with powerhouses like Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and many others, constantly collecting data on you. They're listening to your phone calls, which we know from everything that Edward Snowden leaked. You can listen to the podcast with him on the Joe Rogan Experience, which is absolutely frightening. Now, even though America might not be looking right at your information all the time, they are collecting it. They have a file on you right now that they could pull up at any time. They have recordings of almost all of your conversations. They have data on you big time. In fact, the American government might know you better than you know yourself. Coming in at number 5, we have the moon base. Now this one is a major speculation, but apparently the Americans didn't just land on the moon, leave a flag, and then bounce. They built a base up there so they could have a military advantage that no one would expect. The idea behind this is that in the late 50s there was a plan to take a nuke up to the moon, leave it there, and blow it up. This way the whole world could watch a nuke blow up on the moon, and it would display how powerful America is. Now that was a real plan. They obviously didn't go through with this plan because it's super extra, but people think they still went up there, placed nukes there, just in case they have to shoot a moon nuke at someone someday. Coming in at number 4, we have what's going on with the food. What is going on with American food? It has been known for a long time that many people have their hands in the American food supply, from pharmaceutical companies to Monsanto's to billionaire lobbyists who can manipulate the FDA to bend to their will with money. It goes from small stuff like no labeling on GMO products to large stuff like sneaking high fructose corn syrup into everything. And in some states, it's cheaper to buy fruit punch than it is to buy water. It's hard to keep yourself healthy when the super rich are going out of their way to make sure that everything you put in your mouth is poison. Coming in at number 3, we have time travel. We think it would be impossible to travel through time, but apparently the Americans have been doing this for quite some time. Declassified information about Project Pegasus came forward, which revealed that DARPA had been working on time travel for years, and while the final pieces of the report suggested that they shut down the program due to lack of success, there have been reports from attorney Andrew D. Basiago. He stated that not only has the US government perfected this tech, but that he has also been sent through time himself. Honestly, I hope that this is true, because this would be the answer to fixing global warming. I would just hope that whoever is using this power isn't completely evil, please. Coming in at number 2, we have the destabilization of Iran. In the 1960s, Iran elected a new leader, and it seemed that the country had a prosperous new future. The leader was left-leaning, agnostic, and wanted to see a future that had a free and powerful Iran. But having Iran as a new powerhouse in the Middle East did not fare well for the American interests, so they staged a coup. Through American broadcasting systems, they televised a fake revolution and posted it all over Iranian news. This made the Iranian people think that a revolution was happening and gave fuel to the anti-Western sentiment that some people felt about the new leader. They overthrew a democratically elected official and put a Shah in place who would tear down any hope of Iran being a free and prosperous country. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have who killed Jeffrey Epstein? Probably the worst secret to come out of America in recent years is the fact that one of the most rich and powerful people on the planet, who had ties and relationships with many high-profile people throughout the world, everyone from governors to presidents to billionaires to actors to people all throughout Hollywood to princes and kings and all that stuff, was also in possession of an island who he used for sex trafficking. He would use this island so all of these high-profile scum could perform horrible deeds with people. And then it was discovered, people came forward, this guy was arrested and then thrown in jail. Now people sat and waited for the most high-profile case in American history to be put underway, but before Epstein could spill the beans, he took his own life in solitary confinement. But this was super suspicious because the camera to his cell was turned off at the time of his death, and his injuries were in conjunction with someone being strangled, not someone being hung. So it was pretty clear that this guy who had dirt on the most rich and powerful people on the planet was killed so he wouldn't open his mouth. Now the question is, who killed Jeffrey Epstein?